Today's episode is sponsored by ECI Software Solutions, end-to-end solutions built, maintained, and enhanced for your industry's changing needs. Visit them at ECISolutions.com.
Aerospace and defense manufacturing.
Machines and automation.
Additive manufacturing.
Smart manufacturing.
The global manufacturing economy.
Welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals, powered by SME. From the design screen to the shop floor to final assembly, we drive the conversation about making manufacturing smarter by connecting people who are passionate about manufacturing.
Hello, and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. I'm your host, Amy Bryson, contributing lead editor of Smart Manufacturing Magazine. And today, we'll discuss going from design to delivery, and that is bridging the gap with integrated engineering tools. And my guest today is a friend of the show, Tim Watkins, VP of Integrated Solutions at ECI. ECI is a company that provides manufacturing ERP solutions to a variety of industries to improve functionality, customization, and customer satisfaction. Thank you for joining us, Tim, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad I didn't annoy you too much to not get invited again.
I know we had so much to say, we decided to continue the conversation.
I love it. Well, I'm excited to be here and talk to your audience.
Wonderful. So for those who didn't hear our previous conversation, can you just give our listeners a bit of background about you and the work you're doing over at ECI?
Yeah, so ECI is an organization that is focused on small to medium businesses. It is at the core of everything that we do. My division is manufacturing, so really working with discrete, repetitive manufacturers, job shop manufacturing, and of course, engineer-to-order manufacturers to really help provide them an ERP solution that can take them from manual, siloed processes into a true software guiding their solution and helping them recreate a foundation of success and growth for their organizations.
Well, that's wonderful. Many of our listeners are just that small to mid-sized manufacturers, so that's great. And there's going to be a lot of relevant information for them, no doubt, with this conversation. So let's talk about some of the common communication gaps that engineering teams face in, say, a traditional manufacturing process without integrated ERPs.
It all comes down to communication, doesn't it? In relationships and personal, private, et cetera. And that communication to me starts with documentation and tracking, something that a lot of engineers really hold close to their heart. What happened? What needs to happen next time are absolutely critical. And without an ERP, you're really putting that into silos of information, silos of data, and really hoping that you remember it next time. This causes those communication gaps where one person might remember it, but does everybody? Does the next person that's building out that project, that widget, that woozle, et cetera? So let's walk through a traditional engineering engineer-to-order process. Engineering creates the drawings maybe off of a customer spec or an idea. Maybe they're creating a back of a napkin estimate to get the quote, win the order, and get that sale. Order comes in, and then they actually start doing the true engineering work and going to the detail, doing the true work. Well, how do you track all of that work to use again? How can you compare one quote to another quote easily using maybe as a same as accept type process to not have to recreate the wheel every single time? Have you used this part before, this process before, this idea before, and how can that help drive your next project? After everything is done, everything's estimated, manufacturing process finally starts, how do you track what happens on the floor? Engineering change orders, red lines, process improvements, substitute parts. All of those things happen constantly in the world that your listeners are dealing with day in and day out. That's really where an ERP can help carry that burden. Again, tracking the what happened to also prepare you for what needs to happen the next time.
So let's talk about, a scenario where this, seamless data flow between design and manufacturing that it is facilitated by an ERP can help avoid, these communication gaps, kind of break down the silos and reduce, chances of error, et cetera. Can you share some examples with our listeners?
Yeah, I was actually on site with a customer that I worked with a few years ago. And it reminded me of the situation I ran into with that customer that really started the conversation around them needing an ERP. And it was a heavily configured part. It was a slit and rewind machine for labels. So they're making these custom to order. They're very heavily engineered with some configuration options as well. They didn't have a system. They were really just working off of Excel, spreadsheets, whiteboards, and they ran into an error where a manual error cost them $20,000 in raw material. It was a large piece of metal that was cut in the wrong way because someone forgot to tell somebody, hey, we changed this part a bit. We changed the orientation. Yeah, they could eventually reuse that part, but it could be years before they had that specific instance happen again. So that's $20,000 just gone because one person forgot to tell 45 other people or 10 other people in the organization, hey, we made a little change. Don't cut this big block, this wheel, this rod, this whatever. Don't do this. Do it a different way. And it just was a lack of communication rather than a true error. It's that happens all the time when you're depending on humans to not be human. And I say that to mean you want them to be robotic. You want them to be processes. You want them to drive true forecasting, true information seamlessly all the time. That's not human. That's an ERP. And that's really what an ERP can do is, maybe it's not a $20,000 mistake every time, but a couple $100 mistakes a couple 100 times a year adds up to 20s of thousands of dollars very easily.
Wow. And that's the stuff that they know about, right? So I'm sure there are things that kind of slide through the cracks that kind of go unnoticed for a while, but eventually catch up with people.
It does. And really understanding, is it a mountain or a molehill? Is it how many mistakes are we losing money on? So many organizations that I talk to, how they understand their profitability if their bank account went up month over month. That doesn't allow you to have the granularity, the insight into what's actually driving a profitability of your business, if it is profitable. Where are the holes in the bucket that are leaving your profit out on the shop floor? You all have them. You just don't have any visibility into what they are and where they're happening.
Do you find that this light bulb moment of companies realize that they need an ERP, or do you find yourself having to educate them on what's possible with an ERP, as well as, how cost-effective an ERP solution can be? I mean, what is that light bulb moment usually for customers?
That's a fantastic question, and it is a light bulb moment. I'd say the majority of people come to us. It's usually a mid-level, higher-level person in the organization, maybe not the C-level or the ownership, but somebody that maybe has experience in another organization that is driving that type of conversation that says, hey, there's a better way of doing this. Why aren't we doing it this way? That has that light bulb moment thrust upon them in one way or another. But there is a lot of education, and that's part of what our sales team, our sales engineer team goes through, is to really understand, first and foremost, are you at the point where you need an ERP? There's some companies that we talk to that they don't really need an ERP yet. They're not at that point in where their growth curve is. They need a solution to a problem, but maybe they don't need an actual ERP. And we make those recommendations if it's something that we offer or something that we don't offer, just to make sure that when they are ready for an ERP, they come back to us. And that's really the end game. So a lot of education, a lot of conversations around what an investment is, not only a financial investment, an investment that you asked about, but the resource and time investment. That's usually one of the bigger pushbacks is we have the money and the financial capital to do this, but do I have the human capital? Do I have the expertise? Do I have the wherewithal in my organization to be able to go through this change? And there's a lot of change management conversations that we have too, just getting your team ready for something like this. And I was talking to a sales rep earlier today, and it was a company that reached out. They said they wanted to sign this month. For the last 2 months, they said this is the month that they want to buy and they want to really execute on something. And it got to a point the owner's like, no, we're just not ready for it yet. We need a couple more months. And they let the fear or of their imagination of what an implementation stop them from doing it rather than the reality. They read too many horror stories or watched too many news about failed implementations. That's not the reality with specific organizations like ECI, where we control the process and do a lot of things. There's lots of other ERPs that do that. It's about finding the right vendor and the right partner to drive that type of conversation. So don't let the fear of the unknown in your imagination ruin you from making your best the best decision for your organization.
Right. And it starts with a conversation. And I think, a lot of small and mid-sized manufacturers, I think, don't do themselves the service of having conversations with potential vendor partners that can scale and grow with them and can make recommendations, just like you said. Sometimes it's like, you're not ready, but here are some things to get ready based on your planned growth trajectory. So I think it's important for people to instead of burying their head in the sand, widen the net, talk to people, get out there, talk to other manufacturers. I think one thing that I'm seeing happen in manufacturing, especially among small and mid-size, and with larger manufacturers understanding that the success of manufacturing in the U.S. really does rely on small and mid-sized manufacturers to, reap the rewards and benefits of smart manufacturing technologies and processes. So it's becoming, an all-hands-on-deck effort. It's becoming very collaborative and in the ways that it can be without, losing a competitive advantage. But knowledge sharing and information sharing about what's working, what's not, I think those barriers are dropping a little bit too, so that, everybody can have success. So that's exciting to see from my perspective. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, sensitive engineering data. So we've got all this data flowing through the ERP. From your perspective, how does technology ensure data security and access control?
Yeah, that is a critical piece that we do touch on in our discovery process of really talking to an organization to figure out what do they actually need. It's one thing I would look for, and something that not all ERPs do is if they have field level security. So that pretty much means a lot of organizations will have table level security or form level security. So if I can't get to that table or get to that form, I can't see anything on it. Field level security allows you to get a lot more granular. The example I always use is sales commissions. I love sales guys. I love picking on them. So I probably want a sales rep to be able to see how much commission percentage they're going to get on this order. I probably don't want them to be able to edit that. So you don't want that. You don't want your salespeople naming their own commission rates. I'd put 100% on every single one of mine, guaranteed without a doubt. But you want them to be able to see that. There might be situations where you don't want them to have access to that and can't even visualize it. So that is absolutely critical of understanding the level of security permissions that you are able to address into the ERP. Another piece is document control. If you have that, how are you handling that? And that can be a complicated piece of the puzzle. Who needs to have access to that, to be able to view it, to be able to get to that folder? Who has editing capabilities? Heck, who doesn't need to even see it at all? So a lot of this is done in the implementation, where we walk our customers through that thought process about their process flows, access controls, how to mimic or improve what they're doing now into the ERP software. The final piece around data to me is defining the data, the truth, the golden rule of data. So if something is in multiple places, where is the right one every time? That is something an ERP can really help stabilize you with. For example, you've got document drawings out on the shop floor. Is that the record of truth, or is it the one on the hard drive or the one in the file cabinet? How do you know that you're on the right revision of that piece of paper that has been printed out? What happens if you have a change? Do you make sure you can go and destroy all those old copies of paper? Because if you're not, it's very likely that you're going to have an old revision being created out there and you don't even realize it. So working through that data management to make sure that you're creating those processes, you're creating those access controls, and that's something that the ERP can definitely help drive for you.
So let's talk a little bit about scale and how an ERP integration should and can scale to accommodate needs of growing engineering teams, and also, things related to complex projects. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, as teams scale and become larger, or you start working on larger, more complicated projects, the most critical thing to me is you need to really drive into improved visibility. In my opinion, there are two ways to do that successfully. The first is you hire more people, they enter more data, and you have more meetings to talk about the things that happened, which that's everybody's favorite thing, right? More meetings, more data entry, more data management requires more people, More people requires more communications, which requires more meetings. So that's everybody's favorite. But at a certain point, that does make sense of hiring an intern, bringing in another person, having a weekly meeting or a daily meeting. There's a level that does make sense. Once those responsibilities have moved from a single source to multiple sources, you have meetings, you have silos of information, you have some of the other things that we've talked about. That is scalable to a certain point. And mind you, I'm the ERP guy. I tell you this, that is scalable to a certain point with success. From going from a one person doing everything to 3 people doing everything and they're in the same office all day, you can scale to that without a bunch of meetings. The second, though, is through an ERP or an investment in software to drive that for you. Streamlining data entry and visibility, sharing items and information across teams, departments, and removing those silos of information. And both of those levers are the size of the team or the complication of the team. You're dealing with a much more complicated project than you've ever done before, maybe 10x the amount of items. You've got billing schedules, purchasing schedules, payment schedules, completion to percentage. You've got multiple revisions of multiple modules or sub-assemblies inside of it. And wow, all of a sudden you've got complicated, even though you're still only 2 or 3 people doing it. How are you documenting that? How are you tracking that again? How are you creating that visibility? So that's really where it all comes down to me for visibility. And that's what I think once an organization gets to a certain point, that's where an ERP can really help.
So what about, an ERP solution that integrates with, CAD or CAM software? Is this kind of a one-way or two-way data flow? How does that work?
Yeah, so ECI products use CADlink. It's a organization called QBuild has it. A lot of ERP companies leverage that, and it's one that I would highly recommend. They're based out of Canada, but we use them across North America. It links with hundreds of CAD and CAM softwares, and with ECI at least, it does have a two-way data flow with our products. So a part in M1, our engineer order discrete manufacturing software, it can be pulled from the M1 database and put into your CAD software through CADlink. So if you're using a certain screw or a certain subassembly and you put a dash instead of a dot, you're not making a brand new part every single time. Operations, routing, parts, they all can be pulled into the system, so you don't have those 10 different parts, a bunch of different routings that all mean the same thing, but they're named something else because 3 different people named them something else, or I named one 3 months ago and now I'm renaming it again and put a space and a dash instead of a dot and a dash.
Yeah. It gives me a headache just thinking about it.
So many, and that's a conversation we have with a lot of companies that are coming off of manual processes is how can you have 10,000 parts? And they're like, oh, well, we just rename everything or just create everything from scratch every single time. Like, how much time and energy does that take? How much wherewithal does it take to remember that the few times that you do? And how I'm not smart enough to have to run that just off of my head, but I'm not an engineer. I need systems and processes and technology to carry me sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That gives me anxiety just thinking about that. So let's talk a little bit about, reduced lead times for new products and how does, seamless data flow through an ERP contribute to, enabling manufacturers to, reduce that lead time that is so critical.
Yeah. Lead time is critical, and especially in the engineered to order space. So for example, say you have 12 weeks lead time from acceptance of the quote to the delivery date. So that accepted quote was just kind of that back of the napkin directional that I mentioned earlier in the conversation today. How much of that 12 weeks are you going to eat up simply on the front end management of engineering, of the approval process? That's a common area where ERP can drive efficiencies. So many times that 12-week time frame is cut aggressively at the burden of the manufacturing process. So all of a sudden I've allocated 3 weeks of the 12 weeks to engineering, to approvals, and all of a sudden we send it out 3 weeks later, another 3 weeks, and finally we have approval from the customer because nobody followed up on them. So all of a sudden our 9-week manufacturing process is now 6 weeks. So what happens? You rush job operations. You use outside vendors. You have to expedite shipments of purchased parts with long lead times. You have to pay overtime. You have to have more job operations outside. So how are you tracking those projects and the next steps aggressively? Or are you just going to take it out of the back end of the 12-week at the burden of the manufacturing process? A lot of the times, I call it kind of an additive type manufacturing process for discrete manufacturing. So if I'm doing a complicated assembly and maybe out of this 12-week, I've got a 9-week lead time on an engine that I have to buy overseas. I want to buy that engine as quickly as humanly possible. I don't want to have to take, after the approval, 3 weeks of manually inputting all of that information into the BOM and into my system. And then all of a sudden, my 9-week lead time for the engines, well, I only have 6 weeks now. It looks like we have to 2x the cost of it because I have to expedite it and air freight to me now. So how are you looking at it as an overall project? It isn't just I'm doing engineering to get a job. I'm doing engineering to set up the production, the manufacturing facility for success. I think that's something that an ERP can really help facilitate for a lot of companies.
Yeah, those are really good points. So what do you see in terms of the future of manufacturing with the integration between ERPs and engineering design software evolution? What are you excited about? What's coming down the pike?
Can I just say AI? Because that's what everybody probably wants me to say.
You can. But what is real?
I think that's
Tell me what
that's going to be critical. So we'll get to the AI piece, but I think being able to bring in information from design software, like we mentioned with our CADLink partner, being able to bring that from the design software into a production environment is critical. Again, that can be a very manual, time-consuming process right now. Manual work creates...
And that's tangible. I mean, that's now, right? So that's happening now. So that's exciting.
Exactly. But how can AI help improve that even more? How are you creating that velocity of data entry and building confidence that it is accurate? Are you recreating parts and materials? And how can an AI system or an ERP system know that you're recreating it before you actually recreate it? A key piece is going to be AI and how it proactively looks at data. Because to me, that's the biggest benefit of AI is being able to consume a massive amount of data and find what's wrong with it or what's right with it. And in a lot of situations, could be able to, in the future, be able to just dump a bunch of bill of material data in it and help me understand for future ones, where have I already done this? Where have I answered this question? Where have I solved this problem before, rather than just keeping it in a black book? And being in the manufacturing industry for the past couple of decades, that's what it's the black book that you keep on your top right drawer. It's always the top right drawer for engineers. Top right drawer, it's your black book of kind of the things that you need to remember. That should be in an AI tool. That should be in an ERP tool. So being able to proactively tell you, hey, you're trying to solve something that you already solved for, and this is how we recommend that you solve it because you did it that way already and it worked. That's when it gets really fun and exciting to me. When it comes to the velocity of data, when it comes to velocity of answering questions, that the massive amount of data that we're looking at is just staring us in the face, but we're just not smart enough to see it. That's where AI also gets exciting. I think AI also gets exciting with training and education. How am I adopting new tools and new solutions? Is it just talking to a consultant like me or one of my team members? Is it looking on an online virtual training portal or an e-learning where I'm clicking through something? No. It's engaging with an AI tool that is teaching you how to use the software as you intuitively use the software. So I think those are some of the things that I'm most excited about. AI is going to drive a big piece of that. I know that's the buzzword of the day. I think it's a lot more than that. I think it is something that can truly redefine and enhance our industry 10 times over in the next few years.
Yeah. And I think it's another reinforcement of the point I think we made earlier about manufacturers partnering with vendors who are taking the long look forward, who have plans to help them navigate what the complexities could be, help smooth that out and make sure that they get all of the benefits from these emerging technologies. So if listeners are not engaged with conversations with someone, like Tim from ECI, you should do that sooner rather than later, because the guidance around this space is important, and there really are some cost-effective solutions that you should be leveraging now that can scale, not in terms of just the size of your company, but with the advancements in technology in the months and years to come. So, Tim, we've covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything else you think is important for our listeners to know?
I'd like to reiterate the point that you said about making sure you're talking to somebody. A lot of the times, it doesn't have to be an ERP vendor. Mind you, I'd love for you to talk to me and my team. But reaching out to third-party consultants, the Manufacturing Execution Partnership, the MEPs, I think do an outstanding job of really educating and defining what success looks like for a lot of companies that don't even know the question that they're trying to answer for a lot of ways. So looking to them, looking to successful organizations in your area or in your market. You mentioned very early that it's a very exciting time that, even direct competitors are pouring into each other to rise the tide and rise all of our boats. A successful American economy starts with small to medium manufacturers. Fact. That is 100% a fact. So working together, identifying what success looks like, identifying how we can all be just a little bit better every day is absolutely critical. I'm proud and honored to take a small part in that journey with a lot of the organizations that we talk to, but I'm just a part of it. So networking events, working with your local organizations. I'm a proud member of the board of PMA for Precision Metal Forming Association. So meeting organizations in those type of environments to be able to say, hey, how can you get 1% better today? So making sure that you're leaning into your groups, either locally or by your trade or industry, I think is something that I would highly recommend. And you're going to learn what success looks like, and you're going to learn what good looks like, especially when it comes to the ERP and the manufacturing software piece as well.
Very good advice. And Tim, if people want to learn more about the work you and your team at ECI are doing, where should they go?
Yes, you can always find us at ECIsolutions.com. We have a lot of verticals, but obviously manufacturing is the one I hold near and dear to my heart. So click on that manufacturing button and you'll be able to see the variety of products, offerings, and solutions that we can help you with.
Wonderful. Well, Tim, I want to thank you for taking time to speak with me again today and share your valuable insights with our audience. And I'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in. Make sure to stay up to date about what's happening in advanced and smart manufacturing and hear more podcasts by visiting us at advancedmanufacturing.org. Take care, everybody.